And folks, as we are going forward, Lene, I see you there. Do you want to make any announcements?
Yes, I would love to just share 2 resources with you guys real quick, if that's okay, Jivak. Okay, cool. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, I just wanted to let you guys know, for anyone who doesn't already know, that on our website, we have a bunch more resources that you can take advantage of, especially in these times today. So if you haven't seen this before, this is just letting you know that it's here. And I put the links to both of these pages that I'm going to show you in the chat as well. So on our Sundberg-Ferar website, this is what you're seeing right now is our library page, where we try to post at least 1 article a month, and they're all down in the trenches, insights and tips for different aspects of design. And you'll see that even right here on the first page, there's even one specifically for how you can take advantage of industrial design for your business right now, you know, in the present times and everything that we're dealing with. So just wanted to let you know that that's there. There's all kinds of topics, startups related topics, business and design, research, you know, all of those kinds of things are on there. And then also, if you want to always stay updated on what's new at Sundberg-Ferar, we also have our latest page on our SF website. Again, just on that top menu bar, it's our latest page, and you'll see all the upcoming events that we have. We also just had a little mask making competition. That's one of our fun kind of just within Sundberg-Ferar. That's how we keep tight as a family. So you can kind of catch up on some of those fun things too. So just wanted to let you know that that's available. So that's all from me. Back to you, Jiva.
Awesome, thank you again. And we should remind ourselves. I should change that photograph on the Tonight Show to this little bit newer beer that I have over here. But again, that was a great speaker. The second speaker we had, John over there. I just love the FFA motto, means learning to do, doing to learn, earning to live, living to serve. I'm going to write that down right now in my birthday card gift to my son itself. Like, and finally credit to FFA. But that's pretty interesting. I love that. And it's amazing to see the abstraction ladder, and that's a pretty amazing tool. Means there are plenty of tools, but that's the way you have to keep on digging in deep. Like not just why, but why with a reason, and you're going to the next element and the next element. And in our world, Sundberg-Ferar's world, we climbing the mountain. You have to understand wherever you are, wherever you start, and to go all the way up to the mountain to find out the emotional, the experiential kind of an aspirational element that people want to be in, people or products or makers or the ecosystem, and then go up and down the mountain to see where you are in the entire creative panel chain, and how to make sure you are creating something which is also have encounter opposing forces looking at it too, rather than just solving one problem. Because I think, as John was mentioning, you cannot just design or create a solution in isolation. You have to understand how it's going to affect the entire ecosystem as such. So as we know, no good product can be designed in isolation. How to look at those elements and to see if some of those forces are contradictory or not, and trying to solve them together as a group of categories coming together, rather than just shifting the problem from your category to some other category. Then it will still be over there. So that's pretty interesting one. And eventually we will send you the links to these individual presentations, so you can listen to it and try to take notes as we go forward as such too. So we are almost at the time. We have we can see Jeff DeBoer over here. Jeff, feel free to unmute yourself and make your video go live. The world can see the beautiful you. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy. I cannot believe how happy I am, Jeff, just to share a stage with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jivak. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's fantastic one. By the way, if you have seen, there was a little bit change of guard over here. One of our earlier speakers cannot make it today, and then as we always go, I have to seek out and try to reach out to my mentors, and Jeff is one of them. And just as every time he rescues me from any hard point I have been, this is now a series for you, Jeff. But thank you very much. And what's that behind you? Tell me a little bit more about the artwork on the wall. Is that you?
Yeah, that's one of my paintings. Yep.
You are
that's
keeping
an older one, but
yeah,
it's oil and canvas. Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep.
It should be an art museum.
Yeah, well, you're very kind. You and
Maybe.
my family think I'm great.
No, you are. I think we can talk about art and just the fine art till the cows come home. But how are you been doing? What's new at your perspective in the last 7-8 weeks in this COVID shelter down?
Well, I've like everybody, I've become like an expert in Zoom, and it was one more social media platform in my portfolio, I guess. Not that I was looking to learn another software, but yeah, it's been okay. And I've tried to really not stop doing what I normally would have done before, but just do it in a different way. And I think by doing that, I think as many probably of you have been feeling the same, is it makes you pause at every corner and question everything. Yeah, and it's like, well, shoot, why weren't we doing this all along? Because doesn't this just make sense?
Yeah.
Not everything, obviously, but as a designer and an innovator, I'm always asking those kind of questions. I'm usually just musing to myself because my family gets sick of hearing me like go off on tangents and ranting on something going on. So this is a great opportunity to rant out loud, I guess. But I promise I won't rant.
No, you should. The world is your hostage right now. Whatever you do, people are going to look out and pick up those nuggets from you. So before that, cheers. I have my coffee with you. Do you have your Dutch courage with you right now?
Well, you cut right to the quick, don't you, Chief? I
know you, Jeff.
of water here.
Can you explain? I know you
over there.
I know you do plenty of things. Do you want to share what you do for fun, including what is Dutch courage for our audience?
Well, sure. Well, since you brought that up right out of the chute, so we for a couple of years we've been experimenting with sort of cottage industry craft spirits, and it's always kind of been a casual interest of mine, I guess. And a few years ago, I started exploring and learning, and I went to an off-campus kind of seminar with some other people that were kind of curious about this whole craft making experience. And I will say, out of 80 people, I was the only one that wanted to make gin. I don't know what that means. I'd like to think I was on the leading edge of something. Maybe I was on the tailing edge of something. But so we started making kind of our own craft spirit for family and friends, and developing mixology around that. We bought a few website domains, and just kind of playing around a little bit and understanding what it would actually mean to take the big step to commercialize. And it's a big step. So if I learned anything, I'm not sure I'm ready to take that step. It's a life consuming thing, but that's one interest. But I think you asked earlier, kind of how are we getting through this whole thing? I have to say, I feel sorry for people that don't have interests and hobbies, because that's what I always fall back to, and with a passion, and we are vintage car enthusiasts, and we do rallies and car shows and stuff. And, we get our hands greasy, we get under the hood, myself and the kids and, their spouses now. And it's a great way to keep us all connected and, have a common topic we can talk about. We sail, we boat. I mean, we live in Michigan, right?
Lake State.
I think there are 4 boats for every man, woman, and child in Michigan. It's some massive number, but we're doing our part. So we do that. I love to row. I've got a rowing shell, and I try to get out in the morning. I'm actually at our lake house right now, and I try to do that in the morning. It's just a good morning wake up. And
that's a great workout. It means not just a rowing machine, a real shell in the water, enjoying the outdoors and just going for it.
I mean, for me, it's kind of like meditation. It's me. There's nobody within a quarter of a mile, and it's absolutely silent, and it's just the rhythm. It's probably like meditation, breathing, and the whole thing. And it's a great time to think.
It is a great time to think. We exactly are on the same pattern. Means I used to row when I was back in engineering school back in India, but now I don't. But I do run, and the best thing is it just takes care of all the cobwebs down, and you just think. You come back, and there you have something new theory or a new hypothesis as such. So you are really engaged in lots of things. Means you did mention passing through about the car. But by the way, people, Jeff collects cars and he hosts his own car shows also. So when Jeff says he's just playing with an idea, he really knows what he's doing. Awesome. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, for any participants that happen to live in Michigan, happen to know where Ann Arbor, Michigan is, every summer we have the most awesome car show, and I'm one of the guys that puts that on.
Yes.
And,
so is it going to be still this year? Like a bit postponed?
Well, unfortunately, it was also a victim of what's happening. And literally last week we made the decision, and it's a major bummer, you know. And the cars are great and cars are fun, you know, but I just love the socialization, and that was what really made us stop, because that whole component couldn't happen. And I mean, the decision was really out of our hands. There's nothing we could do. Yeah. But I'm in charge of all the volunteers, so that was a real bummer. But we'll be there next year.
Absolutely. So I think we should jump to the let's say element in mind. I think the topic that you have chose is what to do when you don't know what to do next. That's a fantastic just line itself as such, and I'm just now looking forward to listening you expound on that. We will see. You can share your presentation, and then we can go into a discussion mode and try to see how we can learn more from you. So the stage is all yours if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, so I don't have a ton of slides. I didn't want to bore people to death with slides, because we all get tired of slides. And I'm not going to go super deep into like design thinking and innovation process. I'll just kind of skip through that. But I thought what might be interesting is maybe if I can share some of the things that really provide me with inspiration, you know, when faced with a big, hairy, audacious challenge, whether it's personal or a corporate client or the kind of thing we're going through now. You know, as an innovator, you know, and after doing this for 3.5 decades, you know, how do I prepare myself to always be ready? So I guess if there's a thesis behind this, maybe it's like, how do we always be ready when we don't really know what's going to be coming at us? And so I thought I'd just kind of tiptoe through that a little bit, Jivak, maybe share a couple examples.
Sure.
And I thought I'd share just a little experiment I did a few weeks ago with some students. Okay. And with a very relevant topic, which you can guess. So if that's okay, I'll let me see if I can share my screen here.
Yeah.
And let's see.
Are those lilacs behind you?
Yeah, they're actually from last year, and it's amazing because we've got quite a. Oops, sorry. I'm going to try that again. They dry out, and
you still curate, or you take care of them.
And then we just she was right here.
That's your car, right?
Yep, that's my daughter. Here we go. Oh. Okay. And let me see if I can go to full screen. Well, can you see the screen?
Yeah. What inspires you? We can see it.
Okay, let me. Well, okay, so it's not letting me go to like full screen, but anyway, is it big enough where you can see?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
So yeah, so forgive the big finger pointing at your face, but so I'm going to start with a question: what inspires you? And you know, we all have to have something every day that gets us out of bed, gets us to work. And in the case of you know my career, you know, over the many years of Sundberg-Ferar, not knowing who's going to walk in the door and what their problem or challenge is going to be, you know, you've got to have something to get you prepared for that, and you need to walk in the door being generally inspired and prepared. So I thought what I would do is kind of pose that question first. So maybe while I'm going through these couple of slides and sharing some of my personal experiences, you know, think about the question, you know, ask yourself that question: what inspires you? And then maybe more specifically, where do you look for inspiration? So with that, that's me. I have to say this whole Zoom thing is is really great from a technology standpoint, but it sucks for someone who like is used to like waving their hands and just gesticulating when I talk. Yeah. So imagine my hands flying all over, and the staff at SF, you know, always make fun of me like I'm some bird ready to take off. But I guess that's my passion coming through. So, you know, what gets me up in the morning is I guess my lust for, you know, tackling a problem that probably hasn't really been well understood before and understanding that, but then coming up with solutions that are really kind of new to the world, and solving that audacious problem in a way that's never done before. I mean, that's like the holy grail. And that's what gets me up in the morning, very simply. But I guess the question really is, beyond that, you know, how can you make sure you're always ready to tackle a significant problem coming at you and do it in a way that's really never been done before in a very successful way? To me, that's really the key question here. So again, I would sort of ask yourself that question. And I'm sure maybe we have students, certainly have, you know, corporate leaders online and so forth. Everybody should always be asking themselves that question. So I thought I'd just jump right in and share a couple little stories here. So what inspires me and where do I look for inspiration? You know, I mean, it's kind of a family joke, you know, we've traveled around the world a few times with our family, and we always took our kids everywhere. And the kids, I mean, they got used to it after a while, but the joke was, you know, if we're going to a new city, you know, Dad's probably already looking for the art museums, which was true. Yeah. So I hauled them through art museums all over the planet. And maybe a little bit of it soaked in. It was probably more for me, but sharing that experience. So years ago, I don't know, it was probably 8 years ago, we were walking along the Thames in London. It was dark, it was night. And way up ahead, I saw this kind of eerie glow. And I'm like, oh my God, I think that's the Tate Modern. And if any of you have ever been to the Tate Modern, you know what I'm talking about, but it's just like big, creepy, sort of Stalinist architecture looking powerhouse that was gutted out and turned into a modern art museum. So I'm like, come on, let's go, guys. And you go over this lighted bridge, so there's a lot of drama. You can kind of see it down there on the right side. And we walked in, and it was like creepy silent. There are thousands of people in this place. And you walk in on a mezzanine, which is sort of over here on the left, way up high. And I saw this orange glow. And we walked in, we walked up to the railing, and we looked down at the floor, and literally it kind of looked like this. The whole floor was covered with people silent on their backs. I'm like, what the bleep is going on here? This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And it was silent and this creepy orange glow. And I looked up the far wall, and there was this orb, kind of glowing orange. And then naturally, it's like, what's everybody looking at? We looked at the ceiling. Well, the ceiling, which was, I don't know, hundreds of feet up, was covered with mirrors. Wow. They were all looking at themselves. And it was one of those moments, just like, holy smokes, it was so powerful. It was so stripped down of extraneous details. It was so powerful, I never forgot that. And oh, by the way, it was designed by Olafur Eliasson, a Scandinavian experience artist, whose whole thing is creating environments that will change people's behavior. So anyway, fast forward, about 6 months later, we get the opportunity to do a pitch. And it was Visteon, who had been having some real issues and problems with their exposure at the Consumer Electronics Show. And I'm like, okay, we have to make a pitch. You know, what they do right now is like a techie science fair. It's very uninteresting. They have a hard time getting people to look at it. So literally, this was my pitch. I showed that slide I just showed you. I actually had a video. And they're all looking at me like I'm smoking something, you know, and my people are looking at me. It's like, Jeff, I'm not feeling like this is going the right way. I'm like, you know, walk with me here. And all I said is, simple is powerful. Scale is powerful. Those two things together have the power to change behavior. This is what we're going to do for you. And I just showed this image. And it was these huge black and white photos of consumers and families with just one-line little quotes. That's it. Everything else was secondary. And we got a call about 4 days later and said, well, that was probably the weirdest presentation we've ever had, but congratulations, it's you. You know, so I guess, you know, the lesson there is, you know, I felt prepared to at least make a pitch that was going to be unique and powerful, and it came from the heart. And I've tried to just communicate that passion I felt standing on that mezzanine at the Tate Modern. And I guess it worked. So, and the booth was massively successful. They got 10 times more people than they'd ever had. And it was like crowd control problems, which was like, that was a big thumbs up for me. So it worked.
And just making, when you showed the last slide of the Tate Modern and the orange orb and the glow as such, means looking at the movie, the Blade Runner 2049, right, that came out 3-4 years ago, everything was literally kind of, not everything, most of it was in that same similar orange glowish things in the entire movie, and it was pretty powerful itself. So maybe this would have been an inspiration for some.
Yeah, you know, and again, I think I'll show a couple more examples of just, you know, things and people that have inspired me, that continue to inspire me when I'm faced with a big, hairy, audacious challenge. And it provides you with this like deep sort of library of experiences. And I think most importantly, outside of maybe your core like profession or area of interest. That's why I love going to museums. I love going to gallery shows or musical performances, because I almost always take something away. Yeah. It was like how it was performed or how an artist engaged with the audience, you know, and kind of studying that. And I'm trying to relate that back to my kind of real world problems. And maybe I'm trying to design a new retail space. How do I re-engage a customer at Lowe's, you know, and with people that are really not engaged. And those are real challenges.
So I think what you're also, saying in between the lines is, apart from you, let's say as an industrial designer, you understand what inspires you, and then you meticulously try to plan to make sure you seek out those inspiration. But I think another hidden facet is you're also allowing yourself to surrender to that artist impression for that time and trying to see what he or she, let's say what Olafur was doing at that time. So I think it's not just seeking out, but also allowing yourself to be molded by them, and then making sure you touch points with, as you said, a theater or an art museum or nature trail, how all you triangulate those together to make sure you are always inspired. Because I think it was you who always said it's when we worked together about designers are not just a wellspring. We don't just get up in the morning and brilliance starts to flow out from us. It's an input-output machine. So as designers, if every day we are consultants, you and me and the entire Sundberg-Ferar and people on the call also, how are we allowing ourselves to have that input in, right? And these are some of the elements where you allow yourself on the weekends or travels to seek out those, soak on them, and then you discharge them out through Vistion or some other kind of enclosure. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to kind of recast that, you know. And I think because I worked with many over the years, a lot of design leaders, design thought leaders, you know, get into positions of leadership, design leadership in organizations, and carry this burden with them, thinking that they always have to have the answer. You know, whenever they're asked, you know, it's like, oh, we need a new whatever. I have the answer. And at some point in my career, I realized, like, okay, that's absurd. I can't just raise my hand immediately and say, hey, I know what to do. I've got the answer. Because I don't. But what I can do is I can be ready.
Yes.
I can be ready. And that's a very different thing. And that really is what I first talk to either client organizations, teams, or students. It's like, how can you always be ready when faced with something that is unexpected? Because I can guarantee you will be. We all are. And to me, that's a more important lesson to learn and kind of a way to kind of comport yourself as you move through life. So Jeevak, I thought I shared maybe just a couple other just little things that have really moved me and inspired me that I have actually reached back and pulled forward. and actually literally used. And again, I don't know if anybody has been in Barcelona or is a fan of Anthony Gaudi, the architect, but oh my God. I mean, if you go anywhere, go there and just walk around the city. I mean, his architecture is everywhere. And I think what struck me, it's really otherworldly. And there's some great books on him, and there's some great reads about Anthony Gaudi, but he was truly, he was devoutly religious, and he was truly inspired by divinity. It was his divine inspiration that allowed him to kind of really go deep. And I loved his quote, you know, originality is returning to the origin. You know, these are sort of these like duh kind of comments, but I'm like, And the way I interpreted that, you know, at least in the process we use at Sundberg-Ferar to innovate with our clients, is you need to start by asking the right questions. And the best way of asking the right questions is going back to the origin of the issue or the problem or the challenge. Really, really all the way back, really peel the onion back. And I think that's what he was doing in his own way. He unencumbered himself with, in his day, his period when he was working, of, you know, building techniques and structures and sort of the whole Beaux Arts way of designing with ornamentation. And he just kind of let that go, went back to the beginning and started over again and developed his own sort of, you know, visual palette. And so for me, the takeaway, other than just being blown away with how he pulled this whole thing off and convinced people to actually build it, was start by asking the right questions and go back to the origin. So for me, that was another good one. And you know, I could go on and on at length about Anthony, but truly amazing. And then in a very
Jeff, trying to add a little more to the Anthony Gaudi La Sagrada Familia, that church is magnificent piece of design inspiration. By the way, just for our audience, it was always a work in progress thing, but finally, Jeff, the final completion date has been published. They're trying to finish it till 2028. Just 2 years after the centenary death of Gaudi. So in all, if they really complete it 2028, it will take 120 years of completion as such. So it's one of the most visited place in Spain, Barcelona, and I think it's just super marvelous.
Yeah, there are not many things that will just stop me in my tracks. That one did. It was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my life, truly. It was unbelievable. So anyway, it really reminded me of going back to the origin of where a challenge or a problem came from, to really peel the onion back. And only by doing that can you really end up in a better place. Because if you don't ask the right questions and the hard questions first before tackling a design or innovation problem, I can pretty much guarantee you won't end up with anything significantly different than what you started with. It's almost a given. So, and again, like I was starting to say, you know, I just, at the other end of the spectrum, I am just a total sop for watching and studying kind of current culture, pop culture. And for me, what's fascinating, and again, deriving inspiration from this, is sort of cross-cultural influence on creativity. You know, I mean, tattoo artists are studying, you know, face artists and fashion, are studying graffiti artists, are studying, you know, rave techno DJs, and it goes around and around and around. And I find this fascinating, you know. Of course, now because we have a global culture, we're really influencing each other around the planet. And to me, what's interesting about this, you know, a takeaway as a designer and innovator, is what's happening here to me is there are new like ways of expression and new ways of communicating with each other within our art community, design community, or the world at large. So, you know, when faced with a design challenge or an innovation challenge that you weren't expecting, how are we going to express anything we come up with in a way that will connect with and be compelling to young adults, kids, the elderly. I mean, I think we can't assume that we can communicate all of the outputs of our brilliant thinking the same way to everybody. And when we start to think about the pandemic and what's going on, my wife would, she listens to all different sources of information that I do. She'd say, "Oh, did you hear what the governor just did?" I'm like, "No, I don't have a clue." I'm like, where did you hear that? What are you listening to? Because I'm listening to completely different, pieces of information. And I'm like, it reminds me of all this cross-cultural influence, and how are we communicating the expression of, the things that we are coming up with. And it could be a government edict, or it could be a new product we just designed. It could be a new pair of shoes that somebody's launching. It could be a piece of graffiti that I want to go find out about. And I can almost guarantee, or, where's the rave going down that's going to start at 3 a.m. in Detroit? I'm going to find out about these things in completely different ways, probably. And to me, that's very fascinating. And to me, there's a direct relationship to how we communicate services we're developing, and apps and products, and new ways for social engagement and community engagement, and new ways for governments to operate, frankly. And I wonder to myself, again, I talked earlier about my sort of silent rants, and I'm thinking about, if I was king of the world, and I was faced with a sudden pandemic, how, regardless of what I think we should do, how am I going to communicate that in a way that will be effective and reach everybody? And that is not a simple question, but to me, that's the kind of question that should be asked. Before you open your mouth and say something about, this is what we should do, we should all wear masks, whatever. Who am I trying to say it to? What am I saying, and how am I going to do it? And literally, I love posing these impossible questions. And how would I do it that would guarantee that every man, woman, and child in our country would get the message correctly and at the same time? How would I do that, actually? I love these. I mean, to me, that's a classic, big, audacious challenge, and it's just communication. So anyway, I just want to share a couple of things, and I could go on and on about things that I find inspiration in, but it's interesting, Jivek, you alluded to this earlier, and I guess I would kind of maybe capture some of that conversation around, the statement of great design and breakthrough innovation does not happen by accident. Great art, although it may be very contemporary and maybe you don't understand it, but I can guarantee it was not an artist's accident. It was very intentional. And I'm not talking about like and dislike. Innovation does not happen by accident. You need to be prepared. Chance favors the mind that is prepared. So again, the question is, how do you prepare yourself to create exceptional solutions? And even more importantly, how can you always be ready? Always be ready. Not with the answer, but be ready to tackle the problem in a way that's likely to result in a positive outcome. So again, a quick example, and I don't know the age of everybody listening, but I can almost guarantee there's a few people out there that are aware of who the Rolling Stones are. This is Keith. A miracle he's still alive, given all the things he smoked and the things he shot in his veins and his lifestyle. The guy's actually brilliant. And somebody asked him, I don't know who it was, how did you guys, as the Stones, create such amazing music? And I kind of paraphrase this down below there. He said, good music comes from people playing together, knowing what to do and going for it. It's teamwork. And what he said is, it's really like jazz. We would just show up with our instruments and just start riffing. And on the one hand, you say, oh, well, these guys just get together with some beer and just start jamming. I'm like, well, I don't think so. Actually, I think each one of those people in that band are really brilliant. And I would hypothesize, I would guess that each of them was expert in many things, probably several things, many things, not just their instrument. And I bet anything that they were amazing students of culture. I mean, they were massively influenced by American R&B. And you can hear that in their music. And so what's the secret sauce? I think for them, it was like multiple sources of creative output and interaction and and all at the same time, simultaneous learning. You know, we're not just going to listen to Keith and then Ringo and then you. We're all going to kind of start doing this at the same time. I think it's a good way to think about design research. You know, I mean, you need a lot of inputs from a lot of different sources to develop some confidence in what you're trying to study. And to me, without that, you could really end up going down a rat hole and believing one source of information and really, you know, missing a bet and missing maybe a core consumer need out there that you really should be satisfying. So I think the Stones had, obviously they had amazing chemistry and they did amazing work. And I think this was part of the secret sauce, but I really don't think that's all the secret sauce. That's just what he kind of was reflecting on. So stop me, you know, if you want me to pause and reflect a little bit. I've only got a couple slides here, so this will be quick. But so a few weeks ago, I ended a little experiment, and I was asked by a design research professor at a well-known design school in the Midwest. I won't get into all the details, but when they had to go into lockdown and online learning, he's like, Jeff, you know, you've got a lot of processes and you've had a lot of experience and all that. He said, do you have any thoughts on how we could really make this compelling? And maybe, you know, our instruction and design research could be somehow made currently relevant to what's happening right now with the pandemic. I'm like, well, let me think about it. So I said, sure. So basically I set up sort of 3 interactive sessions with about 15 or 18 students, all on Zoom. Not too much homework. And probably maybe 4 to 6 to 7 hours of, I would just say Zooming. And I gave them a challenge. And there was some lead up to this, but eventually the final challenge was identify potential solutions to ensure that the next pandemic will not disrupt our social, cultural, and economic well-being. And when I said it was, what I believe is there will be another one. I think we, you know, as an innovator, as a futurist, you can't just focus on the current tactical problem. As a future innovator, this is the challenge you should be working on. What do we do to make sure this doesn't happen again, with or without a vaccine, I would say. And at first, all the eyes roll back. It's like, well, this is impossible. I'm like, no. Bottom line is, after a couple of weeks, we had well over 30 new, you know, product, service, social engagement, app innovation opportunities identified. And I think the students were sort of like gobsmacked by the whole thing. They were like, what did you just do to us? You know, what just happened here? I'm like, well, it was all you. And we went through this activity where instead of just running out and talking to people about, you know, what's the problem? I'm like, you know, I don't think you even understand what the question is. What's the question? And I gave them a couple examples related to the pandemic. And as I was probably eating my breakfast, having one of my, you know, silent rant musings, you know, I'm thinking about the federal government and their ability to try to communicate what's going on and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. I'm like, wait a minute. We've got tens of thousands of people working for the federal government. There's an army poised, ready to take this thing on. I'm like, why don't we have, you know, my question, why don't we have the courage to completely repurpose our federal agencies?
I love that.
Why not?
Why not?
I mean, to me, this is one of those, as an innovator, as a forward-thinking designer, you have to have the courage to ask these kind of questions.
Yeah.
Like quickly. And you need to be ready to ask the right questions. So I'm thinking to myself, staring at my mailbox, you know, out on the road, I'm like, the US Postal Service. We all love to rant on the US Postal Service because what do? They deliver junk mail, right? I don't think that's an essential service. I'm just saying. And they're always in trouble because they're always running a deficit, and it's the organization everybody loves to hate. And unless there's a check coming to you, and then you love them for a moment, and then you hate them again. And I'm like, So back to the communication, cross-cultural communication. How could we communicate instantly with everybody? And maybe even like provide assistance. Well, virtually all of us have a mailbox, which, oh, by the way, the federal government really owns. And day one, they could have been delivering, instead of junk mail, latex gloves and masks to everybody in the nation instantly.
That's beautiful.
So is that the role of the post office? Well, it wasn't 3 days ago, but maybe it should have been. And maybe somebody should have been asking, what is the role of the Department of the Interior? And honest to God, I still don't know what they do. Or any.
What is the role of Department of Internal Ministry? I don't
know. There's probably
right?
10,000 people in a building somewhere in Washington. I don't know what they do. But I can guarantee that whatever they're doing, they're probably smart thinking people who really want to do the right thing. And again, I guess my point was, and my point with the students was, you know, you need to ask the right, really hard questions first, then start to, you know, really work with your team and tackle the challenge with all, you know, techniques of, you know, design thinking and so forth, which I know you've all been kind of talking about. And just, I have to protect the innocent here. Here's just a quick example of what came out of that. And again, what you're looking at here is a template that I gave the students, and literally it's like learning how to play a game for the first time. Say, first you do this, then you do this, and then you do this. And part of what we started off talking about was, you know, Anthony Gaudi, you need to go back to the origin. You need to be a student overtly of everything going on around you all of the time. And that includes large scale trends. So here are 3 trends that this student identified and actually used from another student. He connected the dots in a way that none of us saw. And he wrote a statement that was essentially a question, but I think there's something we could do here, an innovation opportunity that's never been done before by linking these 3 things. And then once the ball got rolling, we had more and more and more. And again, as usual, it blew me away. And I'm like, oh my God, this is powerful. And I would say almost none of what they came up with is currently sort of in our sort of national dialogue right now. Again, so I guess I would just say, you know, as you go through your lives, you know, professionally or personally, you cannot be a casual observer. You've got to be actively engaged. You've got to be critically aware of everything going on around you, whether it's socially around you or culturally around you or physically around you in built environments. Always be looking, always be a sponge, and always be ready. Because like I was doing, reaching back into those experiences, it gave me an instant story to help other people connect with what I was thinking. And that was very compelling. So again, everything is possible. I do truly believe, you know, that every human experience, physical, virtual, whatever, can be improved. Everything can be made better, everything. And we just have to have the courage to be prepared and to be ready to do it. So I'll just leave it with that, Jivak. I probably kind of went long, but I'd love to open it up to some questions.
No, thank you again, Jeff. That was really beautiful. I'm still every day when I talk with you, I still take notes and I'm still adding to my my notes as such. So thank you again. I know we are all in an empty room, but there is an applause going around. I can completely guarantee you that that's happening as such. So it was beautiful to go with that element. And even the question I typically ask, like what you should stand for, about just don't be an victim of just being a casual observer. You have to, as you said, critically observing everything. That's a pretty daunting task, but that's what I think industrial designers are born to be or trained to be. Like, we're always gaining things. It might be a weekend, it might be evening stroll, but you're gathering things. And then I think you correctly mentioned, it's not just connecting the dots, connecting the right dots. You have to understand the meaningfulness and the purpose behind them, and making sure you're creating and triangulating it up to the surface as such. It's amazing to see how, you're saying something?
No, I was just, you know, the whole federal agency thing, you know, it just has been driving me nuts. You know, imagine if we had a Department of Innovation of great thinkers who right out of the chute could have said, you know what, people need food. We currently distribute food through retail environments primarily. What are we going to do quickly from an innovation standpoint to make sure that every food and beverage delivery venue remains open immediately, right now? safely, or any number of things. How do we, what are we going to do with mass transit immediately to make sure people can still be in transit, get to work or whatever? I mean, I think that organization would have come up with a lot of different solutions other than 3-month lockdown.
Absolutely.
Because you know what? The lockdown, I'm not being critical here, I'm just reflecting as an innovator. That was the easy thing to do, I think. Yeah. The hard thing was to ask different questions up front and redirect the postal service and, blah, blah, blah. So anyway.
No, that itself is a pretty interesting way. I mean, those questions now, I will try to seek out and try to see all these federal agencies, which have these amazing buildings in Washington, D.C. What are the nomenclatures and why we are doing that? And what's the reason of their existence? Means right now, you just mentioned as a pass-by solution, like USPS, they right now have a distribution system. They are delivering mail. Hey, why not drop a few masks and gloves into their mail, and that can just take the solution and distribute it a pretty nice, already established system kind of in perspectives too. So it's pretty amazing, means of what needs to happen. You mentioned about a Department of Innovation. I think industrial designers a few years ago, through the leadership of Bill Mogridge, tried to have a bill passed, but it did not go forward. But somebody, maybe you eventually, chairman of Michigan Design Council,
right?
You should take that to the government, or the next the elections are coming too. I think we talked about this, and you always talked about this. Why is that not a question of any presidential debate? Not just about health or money or economies. Would there be a day where in a presidential debate, the journalist asks a question about industrial design or a Department of Industrial Design and Innovation for the US? Would that date come pretty soon? 20 years, 15 years?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a big government guy, but
we shouldn't be debating on things like this, right? Means like, what is the most reasonable systemic way to tackle problems like this? Means earlier we put our money in building silos for intercontinental ballistic missiles, and now should we invest the same monies, or 1/3 of it or 1/5 of it, into having big hospitals or floating hospitals? Means do we still need HMS, all those aircraft carriers, or we should repurpose half of them into emergency hospitals? Right now, we can have 5,000 beds at any port we want, and we can just send an entire armada over there and take care of the solution in that country or that port.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about, Jeevak, and the way I was talking about, kind of like individually as designers, how do we always be prepared? If I back even away from that and kind of go back to fundamentals, I would say of anybody around the world, culturally in the United States, we are prepared from a cultural standpoint, because we've grown up in a society that celebrates the individual and experimentation and trying something and failing and trying again and working in teams, even as kids, in elementary school. And so I think culturally, and I think I can say this with some confidence, working with different cultures around the world, our culture does that very well.
Yeah.
At least we don't have a lot of baggage, and we can kind of get into like a process or a team event instantly. And other cultures really struggle with that. And so I think in terms of always being prepared, I think we're there. I think we're really well suited to do, I don't know if it's the Department of Industrial Design or Innovation or the Department of Solving Unexpected Audacious Problems, but who better to do it? And why doesn't our doesn't our leadership have that kind of resource to go to? I mean, I know we have medical experts, we've got economic experts. I'm a news junkie. I listen to these folks every day, and they're brilliant, but their expertise is very narrow.
Yeah.
And Dr. Fauci, and I mean, there are many people out there that are brilliant in what they do, but it's hard to be brilliant at 10 things. But as designers, I mean, this, Jeevak, as designers, part of who we are is we are kind of expert, and we know a lot about a lot. And it helps us quickly kind of reach into the quiver, and pull out techniques and tools and processes to work with people to come up with solutions. And I think we're super well suited to do it. And it just really frustrates me that, again, we're faced with a crisis. I don't know if anybody saw this coming, but certainly not to the extent. And we were completely unprepared. It's embarrassing as a designer and innovator. We were completely unprepared from a personal level to the federal government level, completely unprepared.
So you have touched on an amazing chord right over here. You are right, means culturally, as you go around and try to stereotype nations, for some might be more precision engineering, some might be more stylistic oriented. The one thing, as you're saying, we are known for as proud Americana is we are experimenters, we are makers, right? We are entrepreneurs. That's the founding, I would say, attributes of what our nation is. We are tinkerers, we make it happen. Means literally land of the free, the home of the brave. As you said, the braveness should be coming and asking those right questions. So in a way, I mean, yeah, did we see this black swan, the biggest black swan event coming? Nobody in the world could. I think people always speculated that people will come and say, hey, I mentioned that, but were we prepared for it? Absolutely not. But the element is, if we have been through it, if anybody can solve, it should be us. We have amazing experts around, and now how to bring those albeit specific small area experts together through the guise of innovation strategy, right? Means it's not just solving a product problem right now, but as you know, and you are the author of that, how to make sure you understand those same or similar industrial design thinking elements to the entire systemic problems as such in the world of innovation strategy. That's beautiful.
Yeah, you know, and I think, and again, I'm not a professional educator. I mean, I've taught a few classes, but I'm not a professional. But you know, when will we get to the point culturally when we celebrate and reward innovation in the classroom, and you know, at the student level, and reward risk taking, and because to me, it's like, you know, we can teach them, we can give them a fish or teach them how to fish. I'm definitely in the teach them how to fish, because they're, you know, our kids, you know, younger kids, older kids, the college kids I was working with, they'll be faced with challenges that don't even exist today, technologies that don't even exist, and how do we get them ready? And that's why my little experiment with this class of 15 or 18, I think, was kind of fun and cool, because, you know, within a few hours, basically, of thoughtful engagement with some techniques, they were identifying opportunities that were right there. They're right there. They just had to be shown a couple techniques and tools. And now they're empowered. And a few of them even they didn't want to stop. They wanted to keep going. And I'm like, well, I got to stop. I can't keep going. But they were like, oh my God, this is an amazing thing we just came up with. I'm going to pursue this. And who should I talk to, Jeff? And I'm like, well, you know, you go. So that's entrepreneurism. That's what it's all about, you know? So hopefully we can celebrate that kind of learning and exploration and failure in the classroom in the future, because I think that will stand us well in the future, you know, future generations.
That should really help. And I think we should be planning up all those things right now. You mentioned about your escape around the world, not only for vacations, but also working for clients through Sundberg-Ferar. A question about the innovation kind of an elements as such. You have been working with lots of industries around the world. Does the same or similar innovation thought process always work? Because obviously we as a studio, we work cross-category, right? It might be an houseware, or it might be a mobility elements. We mentioned transit. We work design on 60% of the nation's transit. How does the innovation things work across other categories?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I mean, I feel very strongly, you know, in the process we use, you know, unwinding these challenges all the way back to the beginning, and then starting, you know, a process of discovery and realization. I think the short answer is yes. Regardless of product category, regardless of service, regardless of whether it's a product issue, service issue, app. I think it's really just more a question of how hard it is to go through the process, you know, and I think for me, you know, someone who typically would lead one of these activities with a client team, who I don't usually choose, I don't choose my students. I end up spending a lot more time going through educational activities, learning activities, design thinking activities I call it my phase zero. It's Jeff's phase that gets everybody ready to play the game. And to answer your question, Jeevak, I think in some cultures, it takes much, much longer to do that because they haven't grown up feeling comfortable doing these things. They may have grown up being told, this is the problem to solve. Here's the tool, go do it. Which is very different than, I'm not sure what the problem is.
Yeah.
You need to go figure out what it actually is the problem worth solving. That's a very different question. And I think there are cultures that struggle with that. And it'll be like, well, what do you mean? What's the problem, Jeff? I'm like, no. I don't know what the problem is. I'm sensing there's something going on. I can't prove it. I'm getting nervous about this infectious disease and the globalization of our cultures. I mean, I'm making this up now, but I don't even know that that's the real problem. Or you mentioned the military, Jeevak. It's like, what are we fighting?
Yeah.
And if we don't know who we're fighting and what we're fighting for, then do we need aircraft carriers? I mean, I think they do a lot of self-analysis. I know they do, but I think there are a lot of cultures that really struggle with that. And I and the team at SF spent a lot of time trying to get those teams prepared to play the game. I don't mean literally the game, but to go through, say, a process of learning and experimentation and not falling in love with your first idea because it's rarely the best. And believing that there are probably many right answers, which is, again, it's like, no, it's all math and science, right? There's only one right answer. I'm like, no. In innovation, there are many right answers. Some are probably better than others, and there are ways to figure that out. But I think the process is universal. I really do believe that. And I say that with some confidence because I've been doing this for so long, working with so many different people and different industries. And it has never not worked. I will say that. It has always worked.
Because I'm just writing, still writing to the elements as such. I know we are almost at the top of the hour or just beyond it. A couple of things I've been asking everybody, and I think you already did mention about being courageous and being always a critical observer as such, but we also have younger minds on our audience right now, younger minds, experienced minds, all the same. Means I have a question, and that goes to all of the people. Means when I grow up, I want to be Jeff DeBoer. How can I be one? How can I think like one? I'm honest to God, absolutely. When I grow up, I want to be Jeff DeBoer. Help me how to be one, please.
Well, you're very kind, Jeevak.
I'm not joking. I'm serious. Help me and people like me. What should I do? What should I be doing more?
Hey, I'm a glasses half full guy, and honestly, I mean, maybe it sounds glib, that thing at the bottom of that page, right? We're looking at here, but I truly believe everything is possible, and that's why I'm usually smiling, and that's why I think when Jeevak, you'd come running into the office like, oh my gosh, Jeff, I know this wasn't on the calendar, but we've got so and so coming in. They left me a message last night. They've got this huge issues that suddenly appeared on the radar screen, and could be some multinational manufacturer, and they're coming in at 10. You got a couple minutes, which is code for I'll probably be there through lunch and in the afternoon. But as long as we're all self-aware, we can all laugh about that. But I think some part of me, I always felt confident that no matter what they were going to say, I had no clue what was going to happen. I always felt kind of inwardly confident that I could ask the right questions and get to what the core issue really was. Yep. And then we could really start having a conversation. And I could see, it's fascinating to watch clients' faces, as they sit around the table. It's like, well, nobody's really asked us that before. I'm like, well, now's the time, because now you're really in trouble. you're in a desperate situation, and we'll do what we can, but we have to really kind of let it go. Let your paradigms go, man, because this is a whole new day and the clocks are ticking, and we've got to be really honest with each other here. I'm going to start asking some really, really hard questions. And it's very cathartic. I think, GVAC for teams to go through that, and it kind of gets everybody on the same page. And it allows me to kind of start then introducing maybe some processes and some techniques that we can go through to really come up with some solutions. But yeah, it's I think that's what gives me the confidence to tackle some of these big challenges.
Awesome. I think it's sadder, but we have to still end at some time, and maybe that this is the time. But once again, thank you. And I think the applause is from everybody else is resounding all around the globe right now. But thank you for jumping in. Thank you for your insights and nuggets of wisdom. I'm still taking notes. I will always be taking notes when you are speaking as such. So thank you. Feel free to be for the next session also. Kindly just maybe unshare the screen, mute yourself and video, and we should be ready to go to the next one. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks everybody. Thanks, GVAC. Thanks, Lamia.